Hit the record. Make sure it's recording. Okay. So welcome back. I heard some good stuff about your conference this week, the reading conference. I hope that went really well. I missed you on Monday morning. It was weird waking up and not having our session first thing in the morning, but I'm really glad that we're back together. You guys looked over the coursework of 2-4 again, because that was quite a meaty section. We really encouraged everyone to go back and look at each other's posts, look through the content some more, because the instructional ladder and the instructional sequence does have some really great content in that block that can be used in different segments at different times with your teachers as they are progressing in their learning. One of the things that I constantly have to go back to is LDC cannot be digested all at once. It's a really great mechanism to improve your teaching practice over the course of your profession. And so LDC can be segmented and chunked in different ways to really support teachers as they are in their own learning process. So thinking about how we've been using the course content in different ways to touch on different topics, I'm really encouraging you to do that with your teachers as well. Meet them where they're at. Don't try and force them to do everything all at once, but see what they can do, and scaffold that learning just as we would for students. So the other two blocks that we really took a good look at this week, and the majority of the posts in Teaching Channel this week were around the instructional ladder pitfalls. And then we took a look at the skills list section of our curriculum alignment rubric. So when we're looking at quality indicators for standards-driven assignments, that's a great rubric to really check and see how your assignment is doing. So before we get started in looking at our partners' feedback discussions today, I do kind of want to do a teacher competency review of all the stuff that we've covered up to this point, and then talk a little bit more specifically about the instructional ladder pitfalls and the skills list indicators real briefly before we move in. So I'm going to pull up the teacher competencies. I always have this pulled up. We've been primarily in this deep dive focusing on competency 3. In the first portions, in the first couple weeks that we've met, we really focused on the skills list and really seeing the distinction between identifying those enduring skills that students need to be able to master in order to complete the task successfully, and the distinction between the instruction that supports those skills, all while thinking about how everything is aligned from our task, standards, skills, and instruction, ultimately to our student work. So if we think about it as inputs and outputs, we input our standards into tasks, we have skills, we create mini tasks for outputs for formative assessments along the way, and ultimately for that student product output from the task to make sure that our students have grasped the standards that we were trying to assess with a task. So thinking about series of inputs and outputs helps us with that alignment from start to finish. We've also looked at 3B in 2-4 when we're thinking about selecting instruction that allows for those ongoing checks through formative assessment around the skills that we've chosen. 3C is covered as well when we talked about differentiation, thinking about customization. I saw the term customization over and over and over again in everyone's posts this last week when it comes to pitfall number 2 around not customized. Thinking about the students that are in your classroom, thinking about the students that are in your teachers' classrooms. I know many of you, just like I, we were, the early LDC adopters where we did not have a really large bank of quality assignments. So the LDC library has been a really great resource for teachers to be able to not start from scratch, but have a really great bank of mini tasks to pull from. But we forget that those aren't take and go as prescriptive. Those are ways, those are things where they are starters, where we can customize those to fit the needs of our task, our skills the skill that we've defined specific to our task, and customize that for the students that we have in our classroom. So thinking about those 3 layers of customization when we talk about mini task customization is really important. So with the pitfalls and with the curriculum alignment rubric, we're really digging into this competency 3D, where we're assessing the quality of assignments, whether it be we're self-assessing or we're assessing or supporting or providing feedback to our colleague in this deep dive, or we're assessing and providing feedback to our teachers around their work. So this session and these series has really been about how we can support each other and support our teachers in providing quality feedback, using course content, and using the resources that we have in order to help them understand and grow in these competencies. So in our content this week, I'm going to focus a lot on the pitfalls because that seemed to be a lot of the focus for the conversation in our teaching channel post this week. One of the points I wanted to bring up is, when we talked about task pitfalls in course 1, when we were really looking at task development together, when we looked at task pitfalls, a lot of our pitfalls and tasks are those fatal flaws where they're the stop in your tracks. That if those tasks include those types of pitfalls, they can cause some issues along the way in either the student outputs or as you're developing your instructional sequence to support that task. Whereas our instructional ladder pitfalls are not necessarily always fatal. So I really like this chart that shows up in 2.6 Learn around is it fatal or not. As you can see with our first pitfall, really talking about the incomplete or incorrect elements. I know many of you have talked about, I think Carol pointed out specifically that, one of the things that she constantly goes back to over and over again is that basics document. Where it literally has you make sure that you can touch each component of a mini task to make sure that you're not missing any of those elements. We talked a little bit last week about how to assess instructional ladders and really making sure that they have the prompt, product, and scoring guide, making sure that those 3 elements are really there, aligned to the skill that's been selected, is a way for you to do a quick check of your teachers and of your own instructional ladder. 3, 4, 5, and 6, as you can see, are really around the notion of alignment. So if I'm missing a skill or the skill isn't relevant to the task, we're really looking at, our skills list is not truly aligned to our tasks that we've developed. When we look at 5 and 6, where the mini task doesn't connect to the skill, or that we don't have mini tasks supporting certain skills, that's another area of alignment that we're missing. So when we look at 3 through 6, it's really about how our instructional ladder, whether it be the skills list or the sequence of mini tasks, are aligned to the overall task and focus standards that we've selected. And then as you guys mentioned, many of you with the number 2 in terms of customization, thinking about customization of the mini tasks to not only support the task and focus standards that you have selected for this module, but then also thinking about your individual students in that classroom for that that period that you're teaching. We showcased the differentiation and the reflection, new optional fields that can be added to really improve the customization features that teachers can do as they develop their skill and practice with customization in mini tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and stop right there for a minute. And I want to have you guys in the chat talk to your in-session partner. So I have them listed here. Talk to your in-session partner about some of the things that you noticed about the pitfalls or the skills list indicators of the rubric this last week. And then what I'm going to have you is have one of you from each group share out verbally instead of talking, because I know with these recordings, everyone hears my voice all the time and we want to hear yours. So in the private chat, talk about your learnings from this week or your ahas or something that happened with you as you might have been applying these pitfalls to your work or to teachers' work. And then we'll have each group share out in just a minute. All right, so let's have each group share out. I'll just kind of go down the list. So Lisa and Marika, what was some of the stuff that you talked about today?
Well, I'll start. I talked about as far as my own module creation, working on my instructional ladder. I succumbed to pitfall number 2, not customizing. I still have work there to do. And working with one of my schools, my LDC teachers in a school yesterday, I think mostly probably what he had trouble with was the missing skills. There's lots of assumptions I think that teachers make along the way. He is a science teacher, so literacy is not kind of naturally ingrained with him. He did, and I observed him working with students, and he was working in a mini task, and through some of the difficulties the students were having, just in a conversation with him in his post-conference, and us talking through what happened in the lesson and where kids, they kind of got hung up. He was disappointed it didn't go like he, hoped it would. As we talked through it, then he I had realized it early, but I helped him to realize that there were some skills missing there, that he really needed to work with the students in, those skills before they would attain that knowledge and would be able to move forward. And so he's replanning what he's doing today. So I think just talking through the entire process, where he had hoped they would be. So that really helped him.
Very good, very good. Marika, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I find the same thing, that talking through it with somebody is really critical in developing a strong skills ladder. But also that I'm coming to the realization that mini tasks are really formative assessments that help us keep track and make sure that kids are on the right track as we're teaching them, so that when a student doesn't meet that criteria, we can go back and reteach right then instead of waiting until the final paper is due and realizing that we missed some step along the way.
Exactly. Very good point. Jennifer and Carol, one of you want to share what you guys discussed?
We were talking about how it's hard for me particularly, and Jennifer agreed, on my own instructional ladder to do it with no real students.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tend to pore over it, and it's because I don't have that anchor to guide me in doing it. And because I don't feel confident in my ability to do it, it's hard for me then to coach also, because I don't really know their students as well. The group that I'm working with the most right now, I'll just be frank, it's like pulling teeth to get them to participate. I've got 4 athletic coaches and a teacher who's had some personal issues. So LDC has not been real high on their priority list. And so I've not gotten the chance to be in their classes and get to know their students, which makes it hard for me to coach what the gaps or the customization might need to be.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good point. Jennifer, is there anything you want to add to that? Or Anyone else having that issue, or or have some suggestions as what you do in order to find out more about the students, even if you're not able to get in the classroom to see?
Well, my main, kind of like Carol was saying, is not having those students. I know how to customize the mini task. And when I'm, I guess, doing it in isolation, I can take a look at a mini task and think of how it might fit with another unit or module that I've taught before in the past. So, well, I could have tweaked it like this and taught it this way with my students. But putting this module together and this instructional ladder together, it's harder for some reason for me to, like, I haven't done any customization of my mini tasks. I've found the mini tasks that would teach that, and I've left it the way it is because I guess, kind of like Carol said, I'm not confident enough to know how to kind of, not that I don't know how to change it, but how can I change it and make it better, I guess, when I'm not sure what I would need to make it better, I guess. That lack of formative assessment, I guess, as Carol was saying.
And I think if we as coaches are developing, task and instructional ladders, we have to kind of think of it as, what are the baseline things that we can incorporate in our ladder to make sure that we are addressing the standards? What is the thinking work we ultimately want students to do regardless of whatever classroom this is brought in? And then being able to then have a conversation with teachers about, this is, again, we think about not having teachers start from scratch, maybe being able to take this module and talking with teachers about, okay, so here is what this mini task, or this is what this instructional sequence does to support these standards. But then the conversation is now about, okay, so in your classroom, where are your students at right now? What in addition to these scaffolds need to be included for your students? So thinking about it, ways for us as coaches to be able to have kind of a starting template, if we want to call it that way, that addresses the necessary skills and the thinking work that we ultimately want our any student to do with the tasks that we've developed, is a really great starting point for us to think about when we're in development, since we don't have those students. But then thinking about how we could actually talk with teachers if we were to have that opportunity. And I keep bringing up Glenda because I love seeing that Glenda's actually getting an opportunity to teach her module. When you do actually have that opportunity to work with a teacher to actually teach that module with them, what are the conversations that can then go into the customization component of it?
Danielle,
Go ahead, Connie.
this may be or may not be helpful to everyone, but based on the conversations that I've just heard with Carol and Jennifer, and then Kathy and I were also discussing the difficulty. There seems to be some kind of a gap with, who are we planning this for? But I guess maybe if we think about it in terms of tier 1 core instruction, that we plan this module so that it will address the needs of, I don't know what the magic numbers are, 80% of our students I've heard. I don't know if that's right. But then once we do meet the students, and if you need to visualize classes of students that you've had in the past, that has helped me as well too. I have this one particular class that stands out in my mind, and they were of all different learning styles and levels. And that has helped me in my module development. So that's just a thought, but they've added the differentiation piece to either the mini task or the module template. I can't remember. The mini task template. And then, the personalization probably doesn't take place on the front end in terms of when you plan. It will take place once you get into the work of, guiding those students, and that one in particular. So that may be trash or treasure.
How about Karen and Greg, or Glenda and Kelsey? Anything you'd like to add?
Well, Greg and I talked about a lot about Pitfall 2, again, the customization, and we both shared that we had concerns about customizing too much. But then I had told him that, I really wanted to see some of the language of my task as well as the text in there. But I think the place for that would be in the prompt. Is that maybe? Anyway, we both shared that we had kind of concerned maybe about over customizing, if that makes sense.
Well, and I think when we're talking about customization and we're thinking about like what we can do as coaches to develop, that strong frame for, a tier 1, as Connie had mentioned, or something like that, customization could be in terms of how am I customizing the skills definition or the prompt or product name and the scoring guide so that it truly aligns using some of the language of the standards, or it's using the specific text, it's using the specific components of the actual task itself, the writing product we've selected. Those are the customization features that I think that all of us, regardless if we don't have a set group of students to work with, those are the types of things we can really customize in our mini tasks and in our module. The area of additional customization because of specific students really falls into that instructional strategies, scaffolding, and differentiation components of it. So if we can really build a strong foundational prompts, products, and scoring guides that align to the skills list, if we customize those pieces, then the instructional strategies and the differentiation component can be where those teachers really spend the time thinking about the students that they actually have in that classroom for that period of time. Does that make sense? Does that resonate?
Yes, it does, and that helps. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. What about Glendon, Kelsey, or Judy and Constance? We'll wrap this up. So if any of the following groups want to share.
I'll go ahead and speak. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes.
Constance and I talked about helping teachers just take a bite at a time. And I think that this is a good way to do it. And even though I'm behind on my ladder that I'm supposed to be doing and everything, I'm using a lesson that I have taught many times before and making it fit into LDC. And I think that one thing that is really going to help teachers with that is not only the formative instruction piece that America mentioned, but also I think it might help them really develop their tier 1 instruction, like Connie said, and make it really strong so that we can get less students in tier 2 because you're going to get them in tier 1, because I think it'll help teachers see how they can do some small group instruction while they're still in tier 1 and make sure that teachers get that before they try to move kids on before they're ready.
Glenda and I talked about just that customization being one of our most common pitfalls, and she talked about even with her own. I think part of that too is that maybe the customization comes in while you're teaching, and whether that's a good or a bad thing. I think a lot of times as teachers are going through things, they notice that they need to customize more. So maybe even there's not which is the opposite of what Karen was saying with the over customization, but that they don't customize as much as they should because they don't realize that they need to customize it that much.
Well, and that brings into the point of the importance of giving teachers that opportunity to reflect and revise after they've done the work with their students, giving them the opportunity, whether it be print out their module and take notes while they're doing it, or taking the time and going back into each mini task as they are receiving the formative assessment to either add in some additional instruction to support or move forward because it did go well. So thinking about how we can incorporate reflection and student work analysis as a continual process is really, really important.
Something that I was wondering about too is we have been teaching some mini tasks, maybe not with the module I'm working on now, but when you're thinking about having students read primary sources and things like that, I'm not planning enough time because it's taking more time for them to dig into those pieces. And so, it is requiring additional days on the pacing and things like that, where, it is part of that reflection part where you realize, oh my gosh, they can't read this. And so, what is it that you do to help them? You still want them in the grade level text, but then they struggle with reading the text.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, Constance, you go ahead.
Judy and I were in our conversation as well, about that time. And I mentioned that, knowing the students, Danielle, you were saying earlier about, knowing the skill and having this alignment. Well, Judy and I talked a little bit about that as well. And in there, my ending statement was that, I think it's very important that you know your students and then you go through and customize. What I have experienced is in doing my module, I knew what was in my crazy little head and what I wanted the students to be able to do at the completion of the module. But it came to me doing this process that we have to know those students, because as Kathy was saying, if they can't read the text, then we have a problem and we have to go in and customize. So I think that at some point we can start our module, and I don't know if I'm making sense, but start our module, and then we need to assess the students to see where they are and what they're capable of doing, and then build our module before it's completed. I see that smirk, Connie.
I'm just listening to your thinking, and I appreciate what you said. That is so. We know that relationships mean so much in learning and teaching and everything. So I wanted to add, Constance, to your comment and to many others. I have learned to fall back on my continuing growing knowledge of disciplinary literacy when it comes to building the skills list. And within the LDC courses, there are so many additional supplemental materials and information offered, especially on that right column. And if you look at the enduring skills lists in English language arts, or in my case, in history, those skills, thinking like a historian skills of corroborating and contextualizing, I have added those things. So you don't feel so bad about, Kathy was saying it takes time to read those things, the text. You don't feel so bad about the module taking up time if within your content and within your module, you're building those enduring skills that are unique and emphasized in that particular discipline.
So that we can make sure that we get to our feedback groups, I just want to end our conversation. Lots of rich discussion around this, and I hope that you guys will continue these kinds of conversations in your meetings, in your emails, in your Google communities, and things like that, as this constantly pops up as you're working with your teachers in your buildings. But also thinking about the first module that anyone builds is not going to be totally customized to every single student that they have in their classroom. So thinking about, what is the trajectory of learning that we want teachers to do over the course of the year with their students? A lot of times we may want to start them off with a module that has a really strong quality, good to go task, and maybe some templated prototype skills and instruction to incorporate that first module, so that then they can learn from student outcomes, to then think about how would I then move to my second module to then begin to start customizing the skills list. Really thinking about the enduring skills my students need based on what they've shown with their skill level in the first module. And then thinking about how we can then gradually up the customization even further, thinking about individual mini tasks over the course. So thinking about a year's trajectory of learning for teachers, how can we kind of scaffold that learning for them in terms of these are the types of assignments that are really going to get at the heart of standards-driven instruction, to thinking about their individual students and how to customize along the way instead of having them try and do all of that all in one fell swoop before they even get an opportunity to see impacts with their students. So I'm just throwing that little nugget out to you guys. So while Jennifer gets ready, oh no, we're actually going to do Lisa and Nina first. So while Lisa's getting her module pulled up, what I will say is we're going to do this a little bit differently since we focused on the pitfalls and the skills list indicator in our section, in our content this week. While Lisa is going through her module, what I would love for us to do is when it's time for us to provide feedback, that we use the pitfalls and the skills list indicators to drive our comments in her module for the day. So as she pulls up her module, what I suggest you do as well is go into our Arkansas collection and find her module, Allegory in the Drama. It's also linked to our syllabus here. And so when you have that pulled up, I strongly encourage you to have the instructional ladder pitfalls checklist pulled up, but then also have, sorry, I've got to move some people around and move my chat. Go ahead and have the show rubric pulled up. So as you're looking at her module, you can look at the skills indicators for work in progress, good to go, and exemplary. So that way you have that pulled up so you can provide some comments in her module in that section 2 and 3 comment bubble. So when after we hear from Lisa and Nina about their experience, I'm going to ask for you to provide feedback using the indicators from the skills list or some warm and cool feedback from the instructional ladder's pitfall checklist this time around, since that's the content that we used this week in our teaching channel. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and Nina.
Okay, Danielle, I think we kind of checked out because of my internet issue. It's happened one other time since we've been on, but luckily I got back on. Hopefully it won't happen again. I think you were going to instruct me a little better on, I just go down and hit share screen. I do have my module already pulled up.
So if you go to share screen and then go to desktop 1 or your internet browser, it should pull up the module for everyone to see.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is it showing?
Yes. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start the protocol. So since this is your module, kind of explain how you and Nina went about providing feedback to each other this time. What protocols did you use, if any? Those types of things. So really briefly describe your process this week.
Okay, Nina and I touched base really early on when I told her I needed to sign up for, it was actually, I guess, last Monday's date, the 6th. I needed to sign up for that one. And she was agreeable, so we kind of started just the conversation there. We hadn't looked at each other's modules or anything yet. And so I guess we learned a little more through the deep dive or our office hour sessions and felt more comfortable with it. The background to my task, though, I was rated good to go on this task, but it's not the original task that I had worked on. So I was going with argumentative. And so when I changed this to informational explanatory, I even changed the informational piece that I used as well based on feedback I got on the one that I had submitted. So that it was good to go, but they had suggested a couple of things. I'm saying all that to say that that really impacted the instructional ladder that I had. So I kind of basically went in and redid that. So it was fraught with issues. Basically, I needed to spend more time on it. Nina deserves a raise in pay for all the feedback that she gave me. She spent a lot of time on this. We were kind of struggling on how we were going to, be able to spend the time on it. And there was a time, probably, I guess, in the last week or two, I know we spent a good half day at one time. It just so happened that we were both available. And so we communicated a lot through, the feedback in Core Tools. Then we had a good phone conversation on a Friday afternoon. What she did to help me, I think, the most, she went back to look, even though my task was good to go, I left my task alone and I just concentrated on the instructional ladder. No, she went back to my task. She looked at my background. She looked at the overview. That helped me to make more of a connection with the instructional ladder to the task. And it wasn't so disconnected for me because I had to, look at some things that I had written there as well. To me, it made perfect sense, but to somebody else from the outside, it really needed some connections there. So I worked on that. After last week's session, I went back, and I knew to do this, I just not done it. I pasted my template or my task template and the standards. I color coded those like Merica had for hers. Mine did not fit, I think, as neatly and crisply as hers did. But when I did that, I could see more connections there. I did a training with teachers last week, and I showed them what I had done with mine. And they were pretty impressed with that. And they even kind of said, we could do this with just any teaching. Just, look at your standards and see if what your objectives for students, if they match up, and use that language. And so that was a big a point made with teachers there.
All right. So Nina, just so, since you were the feedback partner, why don't you share one of the strengths that you noticed while you were providing feedback to her, and what was one of the cool feedback comments that you gave to Lisa when you were doing this work?
Well, when I was looking at her instructional ladder, I saw some really strong components to it that I thought they matched closely with the skills, and they would get her kids to where she wanted them to go. The cool feedback came when there was some customization, I think was really when I was looking at the pitfalls checklist, I felt like that there were some missing pieces that, as someone who was standing on the sidelines reading through it, I didn't get every step or every idea that she had in her head. And I think that's something that's common and it was so helpful to me in helping her to think about my own. We read it in our head, and we know what's there, and we know what our thinking is, and we know what we expect to see from our kids. But when someone else is reading through it, especially if it's a different content area than what they're familiar with, it really brings out some of those gaps or those uncertainties or those unclear moments. So that was a big part of our conversation. She did the same for me. It was just like, I understand why you got this, but I think there's maybe something missing. Can you go back and read it again and see if there's a step or a point or information that you need to add to it?
Very good. All right. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do now is read through her task and her standards really quickly, and then scroll down to her instructional ladder, and using the pitfalls checklist or the skills list indicators on the rubric, provide some warm and cool feedback to Lisa's module right here within the module itself, so that way she can keep a record of it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do that, and then we'll switch over to Jennifer next. All right, as Lisa and Jennifer trade off screen, so Lisa will stop sharing, and then that'll give opportunity for Jennifer to switch. Have you guys wrap up your comment, or if you want to come back to that comment and provide your comment at the end of this session, feel free to do that in Lisa's. I have given you a link to Jennifer's module in the chat. You can also find it on the syllabus or in our LDC Lead collection. So if you want to pull up Jennifer's module at this time and open up the show the rubric, so you can see the rubric on the bottom of the screen in her module.
Danielle,
yes.
Her computer has crashed. She's working
Okay.
on it. I think there must be some internet.
Yeah. So what
issues going on.
I'll do is I'll go ahead and pull up is Jennifer on?
She says she's working on it, and I had to do the same thing this morning. I had to
Yeah.
totally shut down.
Okay.
So
So
she's
we'll
working
wrap-
on getting
okay.
back with us. We can go ahead and be reading her.
Yes. So I'll go ahead and open up her module, and I'll go ahead and share my screen, so that way we can see it. So it's the comparing characters to overcome challenges. So I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show the rubric as well.
Sorry.
No worries. So what I'll do, Jennifer, to make sure that we don't have any issues with connectivity, I'll go ahead and keep sharing my screen so that way we don't have to fight with it. So everyone's pulling it up right now. I see the majority of you have it pulled up. So they're going to read through your task really quickly. And then while they're reading that, why don't you explain your process a little bit about, getting and receiving feedback on this module?
Okay, well, I came up with the idea for my module from something that when I was in the classroom, and I spent a lot of time on, and it was really through my read alouds that I did this, where we would discuss themes, common themes within the different read alouds that we did, and we would do it kind of throughout a whole year's process. And then what we would do is we would go and we would look at some of the texts and some of the texts that had common themes, and we would begin to compare those texts. And so I wanted to do something similar like that with my module, but knew I needed to either use shorter texts, or because it would be hard to use two different novels, in a module and it not take a semester. So after talking with Connie some, we decided to use excerpts. Now with the book, The Junkyard Wonders, it is an autobiographical book about Patricia Polacco's life and how she was a special ed student and she's dyslexic. And then Through My Eyes is partly autobiographical about Ruby Bridges and her going through the desegregation process in New Orleans. And so kind of two different events, kind of two different ways that characters kind of overcame obstacles. It's both about real people, and I was wanting them to compare those characters and what were some of the attributes of those characters. What do they have in common? What were some of the things that they had to do to overcome those obstacles? And so that's kind of my thinking with my prompt. And The Junkyard Wonders is a book that could be read within 2 days. Through My Eyes is written so you can use just selected parts of it, selected excerpts from it. And so that's what I decided to do in choosing my text. And so when I came to start thinking about the different skills that my students would need, I'm wondering why my module's moving. I'm not moving, and I forget it's not mine. I decided to think about in the reading process, I really wanted to focus a lot on annotation and in the questioning and note taking, especially in 5th grade. It was a skills that I realized, thinking back, my 5th graders did not have a good, solid foundation, especially in annotation and questioning. And so those were some of the things that I wanted to make sure that I included in this module. And so I included a poem about Ruby Bridges that we had worked on actually with some other specialists for our module for training, and it included a lot of annotation of the poem. And so that's what I guess if any kind of customization was made in the annotation mini task, I did change the text to Ruby Bridges' Brave Step. And I'm sorry, and I was basing this to compare it with 2 read alouds that we had, which was Wonder and Jackie Robinson, Greatest Man in Baseball. Wonder is fiction. Jackie Robinson, Greatest Man in Baseball is biographical. So I know, Danielle, you and I kind of talked about, having different genres may be a misalignment. And so not quite sure how to fix that yet.
So thinking about the standards that you've selected in terms of, your RL9, which is a really great compare and contrast stories in the same genre. Does that fit the text that you've selected? Those are things.
it fits overall when you look at the background knowledge. Although, I mean, the background information in that the book Jackie Robinson, Greatest Man in Baseball, is biographical, but Wonder is not. And so I don't know necessarily. I may have to change those texts. I'm just not sure. No, I see a typo too. Sorry.
It's okay.
Brave step with an F at the end. And so I'm going to have to really rethink that, because when I started looking at the standard, I think there is misalignment.
Hey,
So-
Jennifer,
go
after
ahead.
we talked, I'm sorry, Danielle,
Go ahead.
Jennifer, you and I got to visit yesterday at the reading conference, or the day before. I can't remember. I'm tired. But I offered you a little feedback. So
Okay, I haven't had a chance to look at it.
I knew you didn't. I knew you hadn't. So I just wanted you to know that you do have a little bit, and we can talk about it or whatever. I'll help you, support you in your decision on those texts.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I will get with you on that.
that sounds good.
And part of it is just that I love those texts.
Yeah.
So I want to make them work.
Yeah, exactly. So what I would love everyone to do, we've got about 3 minutes left, is go ahead and, again, read through the task, look over her skills list and her instruction, using the pitfalls and the indicators. Write your warm and cool feedback in the comment section in her module. So go ahead and add your comments, and then we'll conclude here very shortly.
Danielle, before everybody starts reading and making their comments, I just wanted to make some notes on Jennifer.
Yes, I'm sorry, Constance, go ahead.
In that customizing, since we focused on customizing, you had several really great ideas that I liked, as far as in your teacher notes and using the different tags, but also you went back and you said, I agree with Connie, you do have some information in there where you're customizing, because you said that the students should be learning that difficult text normally requires multiple readings, and if they struggle, but that last little point that you pointed out, that point about if they're struggling and they're using several approaches, that means that they're doing it right. So I agree with you on that. Now, the only concerns that I had was the time for 5th grade, some of your timing in there for your 5th grade students. But throughout, I made notes on the module, and it looks good. But again, just the timing, and I like how you do have it aligned with the task and your skills as well.
Good.
Thanks, Constance. I know we've been playing phone. Constance and I have been playing phone tag for the past couple of weeks, and email tag. So, and I was behind getting things ready. So I appreciate Constance taking that time to do that. Thank you, Constance.
So I'll give you another minute or two to read through. And again, if you aren't able to make your comment right in this segment, please take a few minutes right after we conclude to add your comments in both Lisa and in Jennifer's module. Any feedback, as we all know, is super beneficial, as we are all in the productive struggles of developing and finalizing our modules so that we can submit for national review. So in terms of what we have going on for the rest of this series, is we have one more meeting left. We will meet next Monday at 8:30 to 9:30 again. I'll talk more. I'll save this, and I'll talk more about the national peer review submission information regarding submitting your full module, so that you can get some feedback from the national peer review people from on your instructional ladder specifically. You should be receiving your resubmissions this week. We had a few peer reviewers who we were trying to wrestle to get the feedback back so that we could send it out in bulk. So those should be going back to you this week. So between now and next Monday, I encourage you to continue working on your instructional ladder. And then we will be having a specific window of time for you to submit your instructional ladder to receive feedback. And so between then and now and then, we'll ask you to conduct, a formal review where you do the indicators and use the curriculum alignment rubric with your feedback partner before you submit that to the national review, just so you guys have, someone's eyes on it before you submit to national review. And then you'll get some feedback not only from your colleagues, but then also from the double-blind national review process. So I know that we are a couple minutes over, but to wrap up this session, I would love for you guys to write down one resonating idea or word in the chat that exemplifies what you experienced in today's, either through our discussion about pitfalls and customization and the rubric, or in the feedback sessions, sharing sessions with Jennifer and Constance and Lisa and Nina in general. So if you'll do that in your in the chat, and then as always, when you go into Teaching Channel, you will see on the dashboard that our last week we're going to be focusing specifically on the curriculum alignment rubric. So you did look at the skills list indicators on the rubric for this week. So I encourage you to look over the entire rubric this time and look through 2.7 for your work. But other than that, thank you for adjusting and meeting with me on a Wednesday. And we'll conclude this last series session on Monday at 8:30. Thanks again, everyone. Really great session.